With 2023 beckoning and the election frenzy in the country becoming more stronger each day, politicians are increasingly becoming visible, making more and more promises.
Primary education from grade 1 to grade 7 must be provided completely free.
Every village, in 3 years, there will be a ball in Orana solar.
Patinongopinda tunhu chokutanga kukudzorerai pamakaziwa navamugabe. Toda kudzorera maticha kwavaiva kwokuti ticha aizikanwa semunhu aitenga zikoti zheadmaster nenyaya yokutanga ane udzamu nejikiniki.
But are these promises going to be fulfilled? The electorate is pondering on who to vote for in the council, parliamentary, and even presidential election. We bring you the candidate, where we interrogate their plans, their manifestos, their programs, to make sure that we give you information to make a choice on who to vote for. The candidate on Sly Media TV.
It is a few days before the 23rd of August, and you know, it's the day that Zimbabweans are going to the polls to choose representatives of the next government. Have you already made up your mind? Whom are you going to vote for? We know your vote is a secret, but we continue to invite presidential candidates or participants in the elections to come and talk to you, the voters, so that on the day when you're facing the ballot paper, you would have made up your mind. Or are you going to do it in the ballot box? Today on the program, The Candidate, we have invited another presidential candidate, Professor Lovemore Madhuku, to come and share with us, or to come and share with you, the viewers, the voters, what is it that you are supposed to hear from him and decide on the day. My name is Robert Tafumane. Prof, thank you very much for accepting our invite. We know you are a busy man, but we had to pull you out. You know, focusing on what we have seen so far on your campaign, it is mainly to do with the Constitution, rewriting the Constitution. Where do you think the previous writers of that document got it wrong?
Well, I think that what you are saying perhaps shows that our message as NCA is clear as to why we are different from the other political parties. We are very, very different in the sense that we believe that the problems of the country emanate from a defective governance structure. A defective governance structure is where you have leaders who come in without a framework that restricts them to do that they ought to do, and that is because of the Constitution. So the previous constitutional processes got it wrong by allowing the leadership, the political elite, to impose whatever they wanted into the Constitution and get the people to rubber stamp that. It must be totally different. People must craft a Constitution coming from what they would want to see in a government, how they would want the government to behave, what rules ought to govern them. So you have a people-driven process which starts by educating the people on what constitutional issues are. When people understand these issues, they get to the next stage of forming an opinion as what is best for the country. So we believe we need that first and foremost to get a constitution. But that has not just been our own message. I mean, that has been our principal message. Yes. But we have also had the other message where we say, as NCA, we believe in what we call pro-poor policies. In other words, pro-poor developmental trajectory, if I may use that language. This would then have a basket of policies that can be regarded as pro-poor. I think I've mentioned some of them. Those who have listened, some of our campaigns, you know, a national minimum wage, doing away with the policy of hiring and firing by employers, a national health service process, you know, free basic education in the real sense of being free. ZANU PF talks about free education, but everyone knows that they have never had free education under ZANU PF. So our form of free education is real, and so forth. So we've raised these things. When we talk about a pro-poor process, it means dealing with the resources that we have, minerals in our soils and so on, in a way that ensures that what comes out of it goes to deal with these social problems. That's what the prop was. So what you get from diamonds, what you get from gold, what you get from lithium, what you get from our agricultural production must focus on uplifting. So you put everyone at a minimum level. Then those with money and so much can go up beyond. But we must all be at a minimum. But to get that minimum, it is the duty of the state to do that. That's our policy as NC.
But from what we are saying, minerals is not something that will come when a new government comes in. They are there. They have been there. Why do you think the current government is failing to do what, to take the minerals, sell them, and benefit ordinary Zimbabweans?
Yeah, clearly there is a lot of mining taking place, a lot of money coming out of that. It's almost an open secret that all that is not channeled towards the pro-poor positions. They let the monies go to the very rich, the companies that are involved in that. They remit very little to the economy as a whole. And that there is still a lot of corruption in the processes of mineral extraction. So the problem with the current setup is the mineral governance framework, where not everything coming from, not much, I think less than 10% comes out of that wealth to go to the generality. The rest disappears.
So is it the ignorance of the people that sign those contracts and deals that at the end of the day, only 10 or less percent goes to the ordinary Zimbabweans when billions are going out?
It's not the ignorance. It's a governmental policy. Why you need a very clear framework of what you do with the wealth coming from, and that framework must be open. We must all be reading about it. So you must be able to have it there. This is our mineral policy. You must be able to have it there. In the same way you would have any policy, but these things are still shrouded in some secrets, and that's what we want to change. Any new government with a thrust such as ours will quickly put out in the public how it wants to operate, and you all be seeing the movement from there throughout all the stages and to when it benefits the people.
So, but why do we have it in secret like now? What's the secret? Because minerals are there, and it's in Zimbabwe. Why then would you say someone will come and invest, but the document between the investor and the government is kept in a secret?
It's the policy of the current government. It's the policy of the ruling ZANU PF. If you have a different party with a different policy, our party is what we call an open government policy. Whatever government is doing must just be open. You must be able to get it just, you Google, you get all the information about what's going on. So that, I think, is not happening.
Coming to human rights pro, you are a lawyer, and comparing the two regimes, the one led by the late President Robert Mugabe and the one led by Emmerson Mnangagwa, how do you view the human rights records of the two governments?
Well, I think that for me is a very simple thing. You must have indicators. You don't just say the human rights situation has deteriorated or has improved unless you look at the indicators. You look at item 1, what has happened in this regard, what has happened in that regard, and so on. I was very active during the era of President Mugabe. And I'm still active now. There has been an improvement in the extent to which you can do political activity. There are still a number of pockets of human rights abuses, but they are not as extensive as what they were before. So you look at, under President Mugabe, you must not just start, you start in 82, 83, 84, you start with the Gukurahundi era. I mean, if you don't call that process or that period a period of unacceptable human rights abuses, then you'll be talking about something. Then from there, you get the processes. When we formed the MDC in 99, I think the extent of abuse, the burning of homes, the arrest of activists, etc., the beating up of people, you'd have a picture which is quite, I think, iconic. Trangirai, myself, and others beaten up and so forth. So that era was quite bad. So there has been some improvement in that regard. I don't belong to those who say that the situation has become worse than what it was. I think anyone who's saying that, for me, I'm open. They must be able to point out. So I go by indicators. Right? There are areas where we can say we are worse off. We are worse off in a human rights framework. If you take electoral rights, under the government here, we've been worse off in the sense that you come up with an exorbitant nomination fee. Say that if you want to contest an election and you want to be an MP, you must look for $1,000 US. If you want to be a presidential candidate, you look for 20,000 US. That's an abuse of rights. That didn't happen under President Mugabe. So it must be looked at on this, and I must be very clear that in a number of areas I look at, there has been some improvement. There is. We should live in a Zimbabwe where we all must look towards progress and so on, and we expect that things will improve much better. And as we are in the election campaign at the moment, it's still different from previous election campaigns. The number of cases, and they are there, where people have not had the freedom to be able to move around, campaign, do door to door without threats. But it's very different from previous elections, where it was a bit much more difficult to get out there as an opposition politician and get to some areas. You would have your motorcade stopped at some point. You wouldn't drive. So these are areas that have improved.
And you raised quite an interesting issue about the exorbitant prices, fees for one to participate, to contest actually. Why would a group of men and women sit down and agree on such a figure and say for one to contest as a member of parliament you need to pay $1,000 US? What motivates that figure?
They are motivated by closing space, closing democratic space. The people who made that decision are people obviously that have money. They are people that have been in politics for a long time and they have made lots of money, but they do not want competition to be open. So because they can afford it, they don't care about anyone else. And so that is, so we have made our politics very expensive. And we are moving very fast towards a situation where only those that have money will be able to be on the ballot in one way or the other. There used to be a complaint. In fact, there are people that played into the hands of these, what you call group of men and women. Those that were complaining in the last election were 23 presidential candidates. Yeah. So members of the public say, why do we need all these candidates? So there's also a misunderstanding on the part of the electorate, on the part of the population, that democracy is about all these voices. Go and vote for whoever you want to vote for, but allow another one to express themselves. So they were then moved by that. I think those who were making those comments played into the hands of the primary motivation is to limit the number of participants. And then I think they are better off with a limited number of participants.
So why then call for elections when you don't want competition?
They call for elections because they ought to be elections. I don't think it is correct to say that they don't want competition. They want to win. They call for elections in such a way that they win those elections. Then they devise mechanisms to win. The law requires them to call elections every 5 years. They have no option. Now, if they didn't want to call elections, they would be outside the framework. So I think the question of saying why call elections if it's not a correct way of putting it. Elections ought to be there because they must be there. These people are forced by the law to call elections, but once they call them, they want to win them. And to win them, they find mechanisms of wanting to win an election.
So looking at that, how are you managing as a political party to finance your candidates who are participating and also your campaign?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question that you're posing. Right from the start, the NCA has the presidential candidate who had to get 20,000. Yeah. We only managed 10,000 for 10 MPs, but we ended up with 9. One MP was disqualified. So right from the start, when we failed to convince the government not to maintain this, ZEC to maintain the high nomination fees, we had to be realistic. Our decision was that we want to remain in politics at whatever cost. But we won't be able to maintain the whole cost of an election. But for the purposes of our voice and the purposes of what we believe would help the country, we want to be there. So we had to raise 20,000 from our own personal resources. The NCA does not have a donor, not even a single So it's individual members. So mainly the president has to look around, we work, we get other people to make contributions, and we found we could only raise 30,000 US dollars. But after paying the nomination fee, it's a common secret that we took some 3-4 weeks to be able to start our campaign. So we are still financing our campaign from our individual resources. But we appreciate that because of what we believe in as NCA, because of what I believe in as Lovemore Madhuku, I don't expect anyone just to fund me right there, unless I demonstrate, unless the NCA demonstrates that it has the good ideas to develop the country, that it has some support for those ideas. So in these 2023 elections, we will certainly achieve that objective of showing, first, that we have very good ideas to run the country. We have told people what we believe in, a new constitution, proper constitution, not the one that is there, and then proper policies. Then, so once they get, and we'll get lots and lots of votes in this election, thereafter, we should expect that those who support our viewpoint will start coming in. So unfortunately, we have had to find ourselves. But we don't blame anyone else for that scenario. We blame those that made the nomination fees exorbitant. But unfortunately, they didn't succeed. We still have candidates and we still have a voice there. Then the public would have to know us before they fund us. There are the others who are very lucky to get funding. The ZANU PF people, they get funding because they're in government. Those that want to be close to people in government will just donate. And so on. So they are lucky. The opposition that inherited from the opposition we built the MDC, and then the CCC came out of that. I mean, they took many people there. And then there are those who do not support the ruling establishment, who are so desperate to get the ruling government out. And they just go for this group on a basis that they say, and I understand what they're saying, they say they think they have a more realistic chance, so I have to fund that. So they are lucky in that regard. They get funding for nothing, and no one looks at what they believe in, and so on. You just say because they have a more realistic chance. Now we are going to get most of that funding we're going forward after this election. We do it on our own, and we're doing it on our own. We will demonstrate that there is support for these views that come 23 August, we will demonstrate that we are here to stay.
You have been a member of Pollard, and obviously some of the issues that you raised, are the electoral reforms. Do you think your input there has been accepted or implemented? What is the position now, and as a participant as well in the elections?
It's not a secret that Pollard produced proposals, 16 of them that were quite public, and if people want can get the 16 Pollard proposals that were put. The government didn't take those proposals in the manner in which we had put them. So we failed insofar as we could not move from a Pollard proposal to a proposal in the electoral bill. The government came back to us to say that they are still studying those proposals. They need time to consult, because Pollard is merely one stakeholder. There are other stakeholders. So we understood that. So we couldn't get these proposals implemented for this. But elections are not just being held in 2023. They will be held after 2023 and many years. So those 16 Pollard proposals are still on the table. Whichever government comes into force after 23 August, even if there is not going to be another Pollard, we expect any sensible government to look at those proposals. They are very good proposals. I also read today, for example, that the ZEC chairperson, Justice Shugumba, was saying they also sent proposals to government. Many of those proposals were not taken, a few were taken. There are a few things that we put in for electoral reforms which were accepted by government, but they were minimal. But Pollard was not just there for electoral reforms.
No, I just focused on the
electoral reforms. So I'm not disappointed by the fact that the Pollard proposals were not implemented for the 2023 elections. The Pollard spirit was implemented for the 2023 spirit. The place with a very peaceful environment, save in a few isolated cases. We have had some opening, a bit of the public media, not as much as one would have seen. But now I say that from time to time you can appear on ZTV in that isolated format. We'll want much better coverage in future. But so there are a lot of improvements out there coming from the Pollard framework. May I take the opportunity to say that Zimbabweans must realize that it is not going to be a walk in the park to get to where we want to go. It is a struggle. There has always been a struggle. And so the struggle means you will have to keep pushing, and you use every avenue that is there. For the NCA, the party that I'm leading and why I'm in the elections, we will keep using every avenue to have an improvement. Even where we will get improvements that people will not attribute to us. We will not rush there and say, look, that improvement you are enjoying is from what we... No, that's not the reason. The reason for seeking the betterment of our society is for us to get that betterment, not for us to be celebrated for achieving it.
Looking at past statements that has been in the media, there is this statement that ZANU PF will not hand over power to anyone who will win, particularly for those who did not participate, in the front in the liberation struggle. Assuming that you've won, do you think that will happen? Do you think?
No, they will hand over power. I mean, if I win, I will govern. I think that there's nothing like that. That if someone wins, you win when you announce the winner. So we have never had a situation in this country where a person is announced a winner by the Electoral Commission, and then they are not allowed to govern. You have situations where people say, I have won an election, when they have not been announced a winner. And then they say, I'm prevented from governing. That's not... let's see a situation where someone is announced to be the winner of an election in this country, and then we see who will stop them. That's not going to happen. And I think Zimbabweans must know that it's all talk. ZANU PF uses all those mechanisms to simply do some reverse intimidation or reverse persuasion. They know that there are voters out there who have this notion. I hope with time, as NCA, we will reach out to those voters so that they improve in their orientation, because they are a disservice to the country. There are these voters who say, why waste my time voting for this other person, because this person will not be allowed to govern. I would rather vote for the one who will govern. So it's a campaign strategy by ZANU, so that they get quite a number of voters who will simply say, I don't want to waste my vote. We meet it every day as NCA. You also meet in the opposition. People say, I don't want to vote for you because you are not going to win. That's what he thinks. I would rather vote for that one. I believe all that is a wrong notion of exercising the democratic thing. So let me be clear there. If anyone wins an election and are announced the winner, then they will govern. If anyone wins the election and they are not announced the winner, then I think that, of course, the first avenue is to go to court and try and change the announcement so that the announcement is different, which is what we've seen in Kenya, for example, or we have seen that in Malawi, where the courts say, look, that result you have announced is not the correct one. We would rather order a rerun. But I am standing here, I'm a presidential candidate in 2023, and I want people to know, as Lovemore Madhuku, I actually believe myself that if you win an election and you announced a winner, you will govern. So our headache must be, will ZEC announce the winner? I think they will.
Okay, and still on that, with ZEC, Prof, do you think elections in Zimbabwe are rigged? Because we have heard this statement from the losers that elections have been rigged, have been rigged. As a participant also, and as a politician, you've been in the field for quite a long time. Do you think elections in Zimbabwe are rigged in favor of the ruling party so far?
Well, I think that it's a matter of, I wouldn't say that I can answer and say that elections are rigged. I don't understand what is meant by rigging. Like I said earlier on, you need to explain what goes into rigging for us to say the elections are rigged. I've listened to many people that say that the electoral environment is unfair. That is correct. The electoral environment is unfair. It is tilted in favor of the ruling party. it is tilted in favor of the incumbent. The position of President Mnangagwa is much better than the other candidates in the election. But if you then say that state of affairs is rigging, then of course I will disagree with it, if you use rigging that way. But you need to move on. If by rigging it is meant that when you vote and you throw your ballot into the ballot box, when we count those ballot papers, we actually announce a different result from what is reflected by the votes that have been put in the ballot paper, I will disagree. I will say that that doesn't happen here. But if you tell me, and I know that you make the environment so tilted in favor of the ruling party that at the end of the day, a result would almost be predetermined. So first, resources. You starve the opposition of resources. You make the nomination process very exorbitant. Already, we are not in 200 constituencies as MPs, so we're out of the race there. If people call that rigging, I would say that's rigging. But I don't want to use the word rigging to describe such a state of affairs.
Okay.
If you say that access to the media, the public media will just be reporting on what the ruling party is doing, to the extent that the majority of the voters in rural areas only perhaps end up knowing one competitor or one person on the, and then they vote for that person. If you call that rigging, then that's where my problem is, the use of the word rigging. I think it is not correct. What is correct is that the environment still has to be improved. It has improved a bit, as I've said earlier on, but we need to do much more. But don't call that rigging. This idea that if I go and vote, my vote will be changed, that does not happen. Yeah.
Prof, we have seen in this election, compared to the previous ones, we have seen politicians approaching the courts after the results have been announced. But this time we have seen quite a number of politicians approaching the courts before the polling date. As a politician, what is the message that is being sent to the electorate, and why so many court cases related to election?
There's nothing unusual. It is very, very positive for you to get so many court cases. Fair start. Zimbabwe was behind. We were very much behind other democracies. Everywhere in the world, if your democracy is coming to be live and kicking, the courts are drawn into the democratic battle. It's perfectly normal, and I have been enjoying this sort of question you're posing. I meet it every day in the streets.
Yeah.
I was refusing to answer it because I'm a player.
Yeah.
But when the extent to which the courts have been involved here is much less than the way they're involved elsewhere. Go to the Americans and see what happened when the Trump election. The number of cases that went to the American courts is unbelievable. But in almost every state, you'd get the courts involved. So, and that's an expression of a peaceful way of resolving it. You are not happy. You don't take a stone, start throwing, or you don't visit your opponent, start beating them up because of an unfair thing. You rush to court. That's how it should happen. So what has been problematic is not the fact that people are going to courts. They must go to the courts. That's a peaceful resolution. It shows that our democracy is alive and kicking. You also saw very sometimes good results. You get a judgment of the High Court saying one thing. I'm referring to the 12 CCC people in Bulawayo. That's the High Court. Then the next day, the Supreme Court says, no, you go and contest in the election. And we had others, our colleague who is a contestant with us, President Valerio, Elizabeth Valerio. She is denied by the nomination court. She goes to the High Court. The High Court says, no, she must be on the ballot. That is, and I must emphasize, that is how it should be. People must not get tired of the courts. That's what courts must do. But the courts must improve. Why this thing became quite evident that the people are in the courts were very slow in resolving those. We should move to a situation where the courts sit at midnight. And this is what you find in other democracies. A day or two, a dispute must be resolved. We ought to have had these matters resolved long back, which is what I think they realized it late. And so the courts were following the normal, we need to change the rules. 4 days, 2 days, that and so. All those rules must be changed. Courts must sit in a more flexible manner. And I expect the courts to change there are models, right? So not so many documents must be there. A judge who is supposed to determine an electoral dispute must be able to call the parties and say, this is you just file a small statement which says why you are unhappy. You go to a meeting with a judge which is called a case management. That's not what is happening. You go to a case management meeting just by simply filing your notice of unhappiness. Then you work out the timelines with the judge, which can be within 2 days. That is what I'm sure it will improve next time. So my answer to your question is perfectly normal. The courts must do their work. That's why they are there. The Constitution puts them there. They are a very important component. The state is the legislature, those who make law. The executive, those who implement or formulate policy, and the judiciary that resolves. These three arms of the state, when we are in a heated environment like now, must be all at work.
Yeah, maybe it's just like asking Lionel Messi, why do we have so many soccer matches? You know, as a lawyer, obviously, it's a battlefield. You would enjoy
but
that.
I've clarified.
Still on that, Prof, out of interest, you know, from the streets, like what they name them, why would Madhuku, a contestant, you know, versus, you know, Robert, when they're in the courts, you take my case and represent me, but politically we are contesting. How do you manage those two to represent you, the person that you are contesting against?
Yes, I think it's a very good question, and I think in answering it, it will help. There's a bit of misinformation. People perhaps not understanding what lawyers are and what lawyers do. But for my students, I always do it in first year. Just I love the medical profession when I make the point to the students that if you are a medical practitioner, you don't look at the color of your patient or the political affiliation of your patient. They walk in, I don't know whether they walk in, that's the language to use, and they are making some complaint. All you have to be satisfied as a medical doctor is that they are a human being. That's all. If they are a human being, then you go to work. I would want a lawyer who realizes that. Someone walks into your office and they have a legal problem, not a political problem. A lawyer must be able to provide legal services where they are required. So you come to me, I can simply disabuse myself of my political thing and say, look, I was in the nomination court. They have rejected my nomination papers, and I believe they are wrong. All I have to do, whether I'm a contestant or not, is to look at the Electoral Act. I look at what the nomination process entails, and I check whether, in fact, that procedure has been followed. If the procedure has been followed, or I believe it has not been followed, I will represent that person and say, okay, let's go to court. They've wronged you here and there, and I'll try and show that. It has nothing to do with it ought not to have anything to do with their political affiliation, which is why, outside the electoral process, it's only that I'm a law teacher, and it's unfortunate that I'm always the only person in that, but I've seen a few people coming to that. So you see me today representing ZANU PF, and so on. The next day representing Douglas Monzora. The next day representing a ZANU PF activist who wants to protect the president's decision to extend the term of office of the Chief Justice, and so forth. That is what lawyers must do. They must just remain professional. The other day I was asked by my client to go and give his version of events to the public. And that's what I had to do, and the lawyer would do that. So if there's anything I now know, and perhaps I can share it with you people viewing, that we have thousands and thousands of people that want to be lawyers who are coming to me. They just want to get to a legal training. Many of them would prefer to be trained in an institution where I am participating, and the reason that they want to be trained there, they tell me they want that capacity to be able to stand there and not look at the color of clients. And if that can be achieved by some training, there are many people that come to me as a way of feedback. But the political opponents, they are the ones that keep littering social media with that. But they are sponsored in the sense that they would want me not to grow politically. They don't like my politics, and you don't like my politics, so you go on to say that, but he's a lawyer, why is it? That's not about it. attack my politics. You don't believe that a new constitution is useful, say so.
Yeah.
You don't believe that the poor policy, say so. You don't believe that I have chances to win, say so. But don't drag into this debate issues to do with how we practice law. Or wow, I mean, I don't think that would be a good thing to do.
Back to your campaign. How has it been? You know, we've seen or read somewhere where some political parties have been denied the chance to address the voters. What has been your situation on the ground? Have you also encountered such challenges, or it has been smooth sailing?
Well, I don't think that is the proper way of putting it. To put it smooth sailing. No one has been denied the chance to address voters, unless you name them. I mean, you go to the main opposition, I've seen them going all over the country. If you go on social media, you see pictures in every part where they've gone. So no one has been denied. There have been situations where the police have not allowed us to have meetings. So you give the notification, it ought to be 3 days. So we've had so many meetings where we are told that it's less than 3 days, and so forth. We have not gone to the media saying that our meeting in this place or that place has been, or situations where we postpone our meeting or we cancel a meeting and we want the police to adjust. They will say, no, you have to redo it. You have so many things like that. But we have not taken it as a situation where they want to deny us. We have taken it as a situation where, as an opposition, you are inherently disadvantaged. So, yeah, some of the police officers have that political agenda. But that's not something that we don't want to be crybabies. We will maneuver that framework. So far, I would not say that we have failed to reach out because of any interference. We have failed to reach out because of our limited resources. Okay. That's for ourselves. And then I also think that people must not exaggerate the extent to which this interference is coming in. Remember, our voters are getting access to information from us.
Yes.
So even if you don't reach some places, some corners, I think voters must know they have a very clear choice. ZANU PF has been too long in government. And it would be a different thing if we were to have competition among the opposition supporters. That's what ought to happen in this election 2023. I don't expect a voter in Zimbabwe, as we currently stand, to say that they believe that the future of the country lies in ZANU PF. I think that the debate must be the future of the country among the opposition supporters. This is the time that has come for change of government. That's what I believe. And that voters must not keep hiding behind anything, any small thing. If you are in the rural areas and you say you are bussed to a ZANU PF rally and you fear for your life, I don't think we have people. We are now 43 years after independence. So those people that are now old, now, if they are in their 90s, they would have been about 50 at the time of independence. Right? So if you are 93, I mean, they're not very old. If you are about 50 at the time of independence, you must be clear about what can happen, what cannot happen. You are clear that you will not be killed for voting what you believe is right. So our challenge, if you get to our campaign, it is the voters. We would want the voters to take their time in the remaining days and reflect what a vote is. A vote is a choice based on what you believe would be the best way forward for the country.
Assuming that you have won the presidential elections come the 23rd, what are the one, two, three things that your new government will focus on that will benefit the ordinary Zimbabweans?
Like I said, the first thing that we will do, of course, we set up a company that is very small in terms of numbers. We will look out immediately to get how much resources we have from our minerals, from our natural resources, and immediately deploy them to an employment creation framework. That's what we will try and do. But so if we win, we would want to stabilize the resource governance framework, first and foremost. And then secondly, we will try and boost the confidence that goes to the foreign exchange issues, the instability of the Zimbabwean dollar. We would put in place measures that ensure that there is confidence in us as a government. Confidence in any government is what will restore stability in the foreign currency market. And the third thing would be to look at the social services that I've indicated. We'll immediately deploy resources to the health sector and the education sector.
Assuming that it has gone the other side, you have not won, and the new president invites you to be part of his or her new government, are you going to accept that position?
It will depend on the terms of the invitation. I will not just join any government because someone has won and they've invited us. I can only join a government as opposed to joining a platform of exchange of ideas. There are two different things, like what we had with Poland. An invitation to say all political players, let's keep meeting. That I'm always open to because we've already bumped in party. But to join the government is a very different thing. You would want to know what sort of policies would be pursued when you are in government. You'd also want to know how far your role in that government will take into account some of the issues that you would have raised. For example, if I were to be invited in a government and say, look, come in government and we will give you the portfolio to ensure that we redo the constitution in the way you were campaigning, I will join any government that gives me that space, if there is. So one must not start upfront and say, I'll join a government if I'm invited. It has to be on terms. What is it? But because we have a country to serve, we have a country that we must protect and so on, you cannot start upfront by saying, I'll never join.
Yeah.
No. If you are given an opportunity to serve the country, you look at whether there is scope for you to be able to serve.
And as we conclude, Prof, why should a voter who is watching right now vote for NCA presidential candidate and other candidates?
Thank you.
Tell them why should they vote for you? Why should they vote for candidates that are coming from your political party?
Yes, I think please vote for me, vote for the NCA, for the simple reason that we are the only party, I am the only candidate that believes that for this country to move forward, it has to start afresh and get the people above government through a democratic and genuinely people-driven constitution as a starting point. I represent that voice in our politics. And that is the reason. You need that voice in our politics. And the only way of maintaining that voice in our politics is by voting for me, for the president, and voting for the NCA in the councillors and the MPs.
Thank you very much, Professor Madhuku.
Thank you.
And we know you are rushing to another campaign rally somewhere else. There you heard it, the simple reasons from Professor Lovemore Madhuku and the reason why you should vote for NCA. And as usual, this is an open invite. We still have 1 or 2, 3 days before the elections. Do you have a message to the electorate? What is it that you want them to know before they cast their vote? This is the platform. The platform is the candidate, and we are on Sly Media. If you can't find us on Facebook, remember also to subscribe on our YouTube channel. My name is Robert Tafumani.
With 2023 beckoning and the election frenzy in the country becoming more stronger each day, politicians are increasingly becoming visible, making more and more promises.
Primary education from grade 1 to grade 7 must be provided completely free.
Every village, in 3 years, there will be a ball in a solar.
Patinongopinda tunhu chekutanga kukudzorerai pamakasiyiwa navamugabe. Toda kudzorera maticha kwavaiva kwokuti ticha aizikanwa semunhu aitenga zikoti zihedmaster nenyaya yokutanga neudzamu nejikiniki.
But are these promises going to be fulfilled? The electorate is pondering on who to vote for in the council, parliamentary, and even presidential election. We bring you the candidate, where we interrogate their plans, their manifestos, their programs, to make sure that we give you information to make a choice on who to vote for. The candidate on Sly Media TV.